Welcome to the first webinar of the new year here from Elemental. We've got a really exciting panel discussion to bring to you today, which is looking at the future, looking at future possibilities, looking at the art of the possible in terms of technology in buildings. So we're going to be exploring everything for cutting edge and future tech, from all the sort of AR, VR, sensors, apps, the Internet of Things, all of these exciting possibilities. And we'll also be looking at some of the perhaps implementation challenges and the questions that they throw up. So those questions might be in terms of ethical considerations, or just in terms of the state of demand and of the marketplace today for smart building technologies. So I want to thank our esteemed panel for joining us today and give them a warm welcome. We have Dimitrios, who is joining us from UCL, who's the program lead on smart buildings and digital engineering at Bartlett's School of Environment, Energy and Resources. Rosanna from Project Utopia, who's the brand and strategic partnerships director. Rick Robinson, director of smart places at Jacobs, and Francesco Anselmo, who is the associate director for IOT, interaction and lighting designer at Arup. And I particularly want to thank Arup for sponsoring this session. So welcome, esteemed panelists. I'll allow you also sort of introduce yourselves as well a little bit further now that people are connected. But I could also start with getting your reaction to, will we go back to collective buildings? Will we go back to the office again? And maybe Rick, I could ask you to go first.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. So, and you know, a couple of places where my perspective on this comes from. I mean, I first started working partially remotely for IBM in about 1990 as a pre-university student. You know, it was commonplace for me throughout. I mean, that was. I then had a nearly 20-year professional career of IBM. It was absolutely commonplace for me to work virtually with colleagues around the world, and in some cases carry projects for 2 years without ever meeting people physically. So you know, I've then joined Jacobs this year entirely under lockdown. So out of Jacobs' 55,000 employees, I've met 6 of them, and only one of those is someone that I've met post lockdown.
We're all 6 bubble, was that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You know, this stuff can work. Now, that's not to say there aren't things that it's absolutely worthwhile and enjoyable going to do together. We're physical, social beings. But for me, we'll take different choices. And I think we have to think deeply about this. I've read and heard comments around, oh, we have to get back in person because we need the serendipitous conversations over the water cooler or in the cafeteria. We need to get back into coffee shops. You know, I looked this up recently. We invented the coffee shop in 1475. We invented the cafeteria in the 19th century. I think the water cooler was about 1950. I think that one. But, you know, hello, we've invented the internet since then. And I'm completely outside work. I'm part of a collaboration of 350 people in 40 countries that's been researching policy recommendations for climate positive post-COVID stimulus measures that's influenced the G20, and we're in touch with the COP26 agenda. The whole thing has happened entirely virtually. So you know,
so it's a no. Is it, Rick?
No, it's a yes, but more. We will do, but I think we'll do it in different ways for very different reasons. You know, tactically, we can think differently. Am I going to get on the train at 6:30 this morning to head down to London to meet with colleagues I already know, or am I going to do it remotely? Strategically, we can think, am I going to shell out on a 30-year repayments only mortgage to own a very small home in London with no garden, or am I going to go and buy myself a mansion in Northumbria? I think we'll all take those decisions differently. I think it's incumbent on places, whether they're buildings or wider places, to think really hard about how do I adapt to this new way of doing things. That's my of course. Last thing I'll say, it depends very much on your personal situation. You know, you can see I'm working in a study. My wife works in a different room in the house. We've got the space to do that. If you're younger in life, particularly in different situations, things don't work out for you like that. So, different people have very different levels of comfort and perspective on this, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we should be aware of our perhaps privilege in that situation there. Rick, thank you. Rosanna, would you like to just say hello to everyone? I'm also going to slightly just move our conversation on, because we're going to start to talk about the future possibilities and opportunities that technology presents. So maybe ask in the home, Rosanna, what is it that that sort of most excites you at the moment?
Well, in terms of technology and IoT and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll just start by saying a little bit about who I am, and therefore I hope that validates what I'm saying. So I'm the Global Brand and Strategic Partnership Director at Project Utopia. Project Utopia is a carbon neutral house builder who looks at things like embodied carbon, in operation carbon. And we do this by combining very different technologies, construction technologies, what we build out of, energy technologies, how we kind of use, generate and store renewable energy, and then we call it intelligent technologies. It's essentially IoT, smart home systems. And by combining all three of those, we can we can track the carbon life cycle of our homes from kind of when they're constructed all the way through to actually in use. And one of our subsidiary companies is actually a smart home system that we've developed in-house that talks to our energy technologies, etc. And the reason we've done that is because people are digital, and we've just discussed the technology and kind of how people can work from home and how everyone's so used to being technology enabled. And therefore we can use the technology in the home to not only help users understand how they use their home, but also what impact that has on the planet and sustainability, and how they can actually manage and monitor the energy efficiency of their home whilst living in it. So we've invented a smart home system that plugs into Samsung smart things, and you can control everything from your air source heat pump that does all your heating, cooling, and hot water, to your TV, all through one app. So you can really have total control and organization of your life. And I think when we're living in an age where people are working from home, when we're living in an age which is so, I suppose COVID is kind of set in to last for a little while. It is something that we will recover from. It's not something that's going to last forever, but I think the habits that we develop potentially will. So if we're working from home, we're understanding our home a lot more, and we're kind of spending so much time in our home. The idea of kind of understanding how your home lives, breathes, talks to each other is really, really important. And I think that's something that we're going to set up now within this space that is going to continue to move forward. And as we look into the kind of the future of that, you then start looking at kind of how can we use apps to generate better behavior from kind of consumers in terms of sustainability. How can we potentially gamify sustainability goals so that you're kind of competing with your neighbors to be the most sustainable, and who's using the most energy and what, and it becomes into like this exciting adventure that plays into the human ego. And there's all of these opportunities that just helps us be better people, to have better well-being, to be more aware of the environment around us, and also to kind of have that organization and control that I think some people often can struggle with, because people are still adapting to actual technology and how that works. So we've got to make it as simple as possible as well. So I'm really excited about the kind of opportunity for people to start focusing on other things in their life, not kind of have I turn the dishwasher off, like what's my heating doing, how do I save bills? It can do all of that for you, and you can start thinking about other stuff and kind of freeing up that space in your mind.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rosanna. I'll get to Dimitrios next. UCL was probably one of the few places where people were allowed back to collective buildings. Was it back in September? But Dimitrios, would you like to introduce yourself and sort of the perspective that you bring on this topic as well?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Dimitrios Rovas. I'm currently an associate professor at University College London, where I'm leading a number of activities in relation to smart building operation and design. So I've been looking into that space and working into that space in a number of capacities over the last decade or so. I have been involved in a number of academic and research projects in that space that started into looking into energy management for non-residential buildings and kind of new technologies, looking at the technology stack and middleware platform so that we can connect and consume data, and then mostly focusing on a number of questions related to how we can extract valuable knowledge and insights on building operation from this data. So at present, I'm involved in a number of international and European projects. I'm co-leading Annex 81, which is an international energy agency research project in relation to data-driven smart buildings. And I'm working quite a lot on digital twins and digital twin-related technologies to understand how they can be implemented and be brought to practice.
Okay, thanks, Dimitrios. And I'll just ask anyone in the audience as well, by the way, we will have plenty of time for questions as well to the panelists. So do get thinking and typing into either the chat or there's a Q&A function as well. So we'd love to hear your questions as we go sort of throughout the next hour or so. I'll come on to Francesco, last but not least. Francesco, would you like to say hello? And we've started talking, Dimitrios was talking about his work with the digital twins. It just reminded me, you know, we're talking a lot about the new digital tools and technologies and bringing that into the physical environment and sort of starting to see these combine. So maybe we could comment
sure.
on how you see that going in the future.
So yeah, nice to meet you all. And yeah, so my name is Francesco Anselmo. I co-lead the smart buildings team in Europe, and the focus of our work is connecting buildings, giving a sort of data representation of buildings as well in the cloud. So that so yeah, Dimitrios mentioned the concept of the digital twin as an example. So our work typically is about connecting physical assets, so buildings and their own services, and you know, and making them digital in the way that where you can gather insights, so you can understand data flows, and essentially in the end know the building. So one of the aspects of the motivation for doing this is really about in the end reducing energy consumption and increasing happiness of people in the building. And you cannot really do that if you don't understand how the building performs. So the actual you know, reasoning for connectivity and for a bridging between physical and digital is really that is transforming the you know, the data that the building produces anyway into you know, observable information, over which then if you are an assets manager, a facility manager, you can really take some actions for improving efficiency and improving the performance towards people. And when we connect digital and physical, we think a lot about you know, the interface between the two, really. And I think that is one of the key elements to keep in mind. And you know, interface can be interface machine to machine, but it can also be interface machine to human. And I think there's a lot of potential right now into rethinking the way this interface between people and buildings. I mean, maybe linking back to the original question you asked around going back to buildings. You know, how this can happen, because a lot of this interaction can potentially happen on you know, still via touch, which is now almost forbidden, right? But you know, you can do touch on your own devices, and so creating these links, these data links to the building, can then open up the opportunity of you know, still enabling you on your personal devices to be able to act on the building and understand it. You know, other type of interfaces that have become quite prominent, especially into the you know, the smart house environment, are you know, voice activated interfaces. And so there's another area where I think, especially in commercial buildings, which is my area of focus, you know, it hasn't been used that much, and there is a potential there as well. Once again, with the help of bots and you know, all these capabilities that the cloud brings with artificial intelligence, you know, libraries and you know, things that actually can be deployed. So every building could have a voice interface, could have a touch interface that is more personal, you know, gesture control. All these sort of things can really be unlocked by adopting a more data-centric approach and actually developing the data side of a building. You know, both going back to our existing building, but especially well, also in new buildings. You know, just thinking about the data side.
Absolutely great, thank you. Francisca, I wanted to, we're definitely talking about buildings, and I asked panelists to build on some of those points, but also go to Rick and talk about not just sort of within a building, but within perhaps a sort of smart place. You know, how do you see that evolving? Could you give us some examples, perhaps, of where some of these technologies are already being established?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I always look to is I saw a conference speech a few years ago at a conference organised by The Economist magazine about the role of data in cities, and the plenary was given by the chief economist of a very prominent institution. I won't say any more than that. This economist talked for 20 minutes about the way city infrastructure allows people to travel, interact, transact. Those transactions create value, an incentive to invest that leads to the city growing, etc. And he talked in this vein for 20 minutes without mentioning the internet. And I thought, surely something's wrong there. That prompted me to go look at the list of the most valuable companies in the world by market capitalization. Something remarkable happened between about 2014 and 2017. The number of tech companies on that list went up from 2 or 3 to 7, where it's been ever since. And more particularly, those companies are not simply selling products and services. They are operating online marketplaces in which we increasingly choose the transactions we're going to undertake. So that to me is a change in the way that economic activity is organized. That doesn't mean that the physical world's unimportant. You know, in order to, you know, we have meals together, we want to dance, we want to see entertainment, theatre, concerts, etc. It's just fun to have some meetings in person, more so than virtually. So all of those things are true, but the way we organise these activities has changed. Those 7 companies now are worth 10% of global GDP. That's just bonkers. It kind of says if you wanted to buy those 7 tech companies, you would need 10% of everything produced in the world for the last year. So that to me is a massive economic shift. And I think Francesco made a good point there about, you know, what's the interface? Because all of that has happened through these things. You know, the always on smartphone with a touch screen, that was the device that totally changed the demographic of people who would use online services. So we've still not reached sort of full conclusion of what that can do for us. I think one of the next ones that really excites me, you mentioned before, is the idea of augmented reality. You know, if you look at the experiences that are possible now, they're part game, they're part theatre, they're part sports. You know, think of Laser Quest combined with Game of Thrones and being something that you all go and do together with a bunch of friends. You know, maybe that's one of the things that the high street will be about again, given that shopping is changing. And you can already see this really interesting mix of uses in shopping between, you know, the shop is now a physical experience of a brand and a product, but you might not buy something there. You might, you know, click on a QR code, you might Instagram something. The transaction takes place digitally at a different time. And, you know, the retailers who are at the forefront of that are the ones that are really thinking about things. And I think, you know, finally, I mean, I didn't really introduce what I do. I provide essentially strategic advice on the role of digital technology in the built environment, whether that's a room or whether that's, you know, an entire region of a country, all sorts of different scales. You know, one of the interesting conversations I had recently was with a university, and they're looking forward to, you know, whenever we come out of the restrictions we're currently in, they think about 30% of students' time will go back to being on campus. I think students will spend 2/3 of their time learning remotely, 1/3 of their time on campus. And so they're then thinking, great, we can use our physical places to educate 3 times as many people. What's that opportunity look like for us? So, you know, that to me is a really exciting way of looking at things. We can take different choices and do things in a more creative way.
Great, really interesting. Thanks for it. Go on, Rosanna.
I was just going to say, just on that, talking about kind of AR and things, at Utopia, we're looking at like, how can we actually make, so the planning system is extremely archaic in the UK, like how can we actually take you know, sites and mass them and put them into a gaming engine, so all the planners digitally can walk around the built site without actually having to do all these planning committees and changing these plans, and you can change the planning almost immediately once you've got the responses, and everyone can just log into a site and everyone can be on there together. They can talk to each other and they can really review actually what does this built environment, what does this community look like around the rest of the other other communities, rather than this kind of two-dimensional kind of plans that we're always looking at. And there's so many opportunities to kind of re-establish or regenerate systems that have, I suppose, have long needed regeneration through interesting ways of actually kind of looking at how technology can be used that perhaps haven't been done before, or it's a variation of something that has been done before, and it offers a lot of opportunity for much better built environment and placemaking, to be honest.
That's interesting, and I want to just bring in Dimitrios, sort of from your perspective. How are some of the, I don't know if you want to comment more broadly, but like how is also some of those technologies, where do you sort of see the potential? How are they being adopted?
So I will take on the comment that Rick made about students and the work with the university. I think what we're seeing in our everyday practice is that digital technologies and the way things are done is changing. So I think in the initial question about where we are going to get after COVID, or whenever COVID is over, we're probably going to get in a place that we were not where we started from. It's going to be slightly different the way the buildings are used, the way buildings are operated. And I think this creates all these questions like how we can effectively utilize space, which in the context of university might mean more students, but also more importantly, how we can exploit and benefit from all the capabilities that new digital technologies bring. My perspective is that is that we're having a great opportunity, and in fact, some of the pandemic has accelerated that opportunity. We were aware that digital technologies are providing a lot of opportunities for facilitating transactional operations, as was mentioned before, improving or helping support operational efficiencies, but ultimately leading to working or providing services or providing capabilities for the people, which is what the built environment and everything that we're doing geared at. So what I'm thinking is that this acceleration creates a lot of opportunities. We can develop new services where we exploit the information that is coming from data from IoT and other locations to better operate buildings or provide services geared towards people. We can create digital artifacts, digital twins, which is what Francesco and I mentioned before, which is kind of digital representations, because I think there is quite a big gap in that space. And then we can use all that information to beneficially provide new modes of operations. For example, for students, what we're finding is that the traditional way of teaching might not be the most effective way of conveying knowledge and conveying learning outcomes. I think when it comes to buildings and building operation, something similar, and working or co-working and spaces are spaces where we meet, exchange ideas. It's not going to be the same as it used to be a few years back or a few months back. So I think what I would like to say is that these digital opportunities creates a very interesting new context for which to have a discussion. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to explore in the following period.
It does create a lot of opportunities. It also perhaps creates a few challenges which we should perhaps touch upon. And I don't know, maybe we go to Rosanna. Would you like to, you've obviously at Project Utopia, created this fantastic interface and wonderful technology. You're then going to sort of implement it. And what are the challenges that you kind of face with that? Is it to do with, I don't know, the way that the customers take it, or the developers? Like, comment on that.
I think the key one is the real estate and the technology combination, kind of getting them to speak in the same kind of, we mentioned yesterday plain English, which is it is that. I mean, at my old job I was a developer, and for some reason or somehow, I used to work directly with the CEO, and he wanted to invest in a prop tech company, which led me to then start looking into prop tech companies that he should invest in, which was my first realization that we don't even speak in the same language. What real estate people understand and what real estate people know are buildings and how they work. What technology people know is interfaces, software, hardware, behind the scenes, kind of all of this stuff that goes on, Internet of Things, which actually is surprising how many people don't actually understand what Internet of Things is. And as we talk amongst all the subsidiaries, we've got development companies, as I say, we've got tech companies, you can see there's a clear disconnect of actually, like, what are we putting in this building? How is it going to benefit actually, like the cost, and you're saying you've got GU10 bulbs, but we actually need these bulbs, and like, is that going to cause an impact? And it's getting these two worlds to meet in a way that they understand each other to be effective for our client, because everything we do is for communities, it's for clients, it's for customers. Everything that the technology world are doing is to betterment that environment. Everything that the real estate industry is doing is a betterment for that environment. But what is surprising is often the technology solution is the perfect solution for what the real estate person needs, but they don't even know it because they can't deliver the message in the way that it makes them feel like it's exactly what they need. So I think one of the biggest challenges is still, even though technology is becoming a much larger part of our life, and obviously it's becoming a much more kind of common thing, is getting these companies to talk to each other in a way that they actually understand each other, and therefore they understand the benefits that they're going to bring to each other as businesses, because ultimately they've all got their own KPIs, they've all got their own thing that they need to be doing, but they need to be working together to meet them. And it's that collaboration that seems to often be missing. It's that conversion between kind of product to kind of getting it into the building that seems to be missing a lot of the time. So I think that's one of the key challenges, is how do we actually educate and get people to understand? How do we get people to speak in plain English? Like, how do we get these two parts of the same, two sides of the same coin in some senses, actually talking to it together? And that's one of the key challenges that I've noticed over the kind of years that I've been dipping my toe into prop tech and real estate.
Yeah, Rosanna has made a great point about language. I think in my experience as well, so the language she was talking is about the language between the sort of the implementers and the people taking decision and maybe more strategic decisions. I find a similar type of disconnect essentially also happens between different people who need to do with implementation, like facility manager, operational technology type of people, and information technology type of people as well. They speak a different language. They actually wants to keep their own set of responsibilities, while we are really in a moment, especially with the Internet of Things, more becoming more ubiquitous. The fact that there needs to be a shared responsibility and a shared knowledge, and actually the language needs to become one for each one. So there's a need on each side to really learn and take responsibilities. And another also sort of a language disconnect that I find is also about all those companies who make the decision, the deliberate decision of creating a vertical system. They basically repropose the same thing that we've experienced for years of a particular system only speaking to itself, so not being open for interconnectivity. And I mean, with the internet, there's always the possibility of opening up an API, but APIs are still different languages in a way, which need additional development. So one thing that we actually advocate together with some of our clients is more sort of alignment around the way of naming devices, the naming the data points, so the structure of the data, adopting ontologies that are consistent, and adopting also data formats where the way you structure the data is consistent. So standards that we are developing, like the building device naming standard, the UDMI, so Universal Device Management Interface, the digital building ontologies, they're all projects which we strive really to use more and more in our projects, so that, I mean, a little bit like if you want to connect a USB device, you've got a USB connector, right? And this works universally across a whole range of devices. We want to really create this universal sort of building connector, so that we don't need to live with this sort of proprietary approach, system by system, essentially. And I think this is a big challenge for us, but we kind of take it really with a lot of energy right now and optimism to tackle in the next this year and in the future.
Yeah. Let me. I was just going to come back to Rick. You wanted to just make a point. I think following up. I think it was more. What was it around the language point?
Well, I guess it's just another aspect of it. I mean, I agree with everything Rosanna and Francesco have just said. And the third part of it to me is timescales and life cycles. They're just fundamentally different between the property sector and the tech sector. Pardon me. When I started in IT in the late 90s, early days of the internet, everything in IT was done pretty much on long, linear waterfall project life cycles. It took 1.5 years, 2 years to get anything done. We were just starting to develop agile techniques, what you would now know as scrums and lean approaches, all of this stuff. It was very new in the 1990s. And what's interesting to observe is, the property sector is still waterfall, and there's countless examples of property projects that have baked technology in at the start that by the time the building comes into operation, it's outdated and inflexible and doesn't do what's needed. It's interesting to observe that in the IT industry, the flip from the linear waterfall approach to the agile iterative approach involved 3 things, or at least 3 things. One was the process, but also the software and the hardware evolved and fundamentally changed to support that sort of adaptability. I think it's quite interesting to look at the world of the built environment and understand how are the approaches to that perhaps evolving so that we can accommodate this currently more agile digital technology into it, but also, and this is very much opposed to COVID does the physical environment need to be more adaptable itself, and how could we look at changing things so that physically our species become more adaptable? So I think that's quite interesting. The final sort of corollary for that is it can be very difficult to take a traditional business decision about how much to invest in technology. A developer that I met a couple of years ago who was carrying out a 20-year neighborhood scale regeneration program said, Rick, before you come talk to the board, we want you to understand that they're going to want to see examples of past return on investment cases. And I thought, well, where do I get an ROI case for 20 years development of technology? Look 20 years in the past, but what on earth does that tell me about 20 years in the future? So there's a degree to which you have to act almost on faith on this to observe what's happening, the rate of change, the impact of it, and saying, I have to find a way of engaging with this, and to do it perhaps incrementally and iteratively rather than, trying to make a big bet right at the start, because I'll probably get that wrong.
I think that's great as well, like what you were just talking about, the updated. And if you look at, say, for instance, a Tesla and a normal car, they are a vessel. However, so I've had a Tesla for about nearly a year it'll be a year in May, and I don't know how many times that car's updated itself. It is not the same car that I drive every day that I got back in May, because it updates itself with new software, new this, new that, but it's exactly the same vessel. And that's the approach that we have to take to the built environment. If something's going to stand and it's going to be a shell for so many years, and let's be honest, the built environment are probably the things that stand the longest out of everything that we deliver, every product we create. It's all community stand for a very long time. How do we keep that kind of up to date? How do we keep that kind of user ready, especially when we have Gen Z and other generations that are going to come into using the built environment, who probably wouldn't even be able to do, I mean, this sounds really horrible, but like basic tasks that we would do, they turn to their phone to do. Yeah, they turn to their phone to do them now. So it's almost that need, that requirement that actually we're going to get loads of generations in X amount of time that actually will not know how to use a building how we know how to use it, because everything will be technology enabled, and we have to keep up to date with that.
Yeah, this I think the subdivision that you made between hardware and software, I think is a very, very crucial one to unpick. I mean, right now, if you buy a control system in a building, it will come both hardware and software baked. And if you want to do an upgrade, you just need to go into every single, controller. Or I mean, some cases maybe there is a, some kind of batch interface, but essentially you need to go into each system independently, and each system has very, very different interfaces. You need to have knowledge of that interface. The reason for backing up some standards like the UDMI one, for instance, Universal Device Management Interface, is really about that. We want to get a manufacturer to adhere to the standard so that then one single command can upgrade the entire building software. So this is why we are, we are backing these projects, really to go towards that vision that is more similar to the Tesla upgrading itself. We don't want to spend a lot of effort, time. We don't want our facility managers to spend a lot of effort having to commission an upgrade of the software, or even not doing any upgrade, because essentially our buildings are just they just have software that is 20 years old. So we need to just change that so that we can get the benefit of added functionalities and improve the ways of interfacing and dealing with energy efficiency and so on. So.
Yeah, I can pay, and that car will speed up. I can pay £1,500 for an upgrade, and that car will go 0 to 60 in 0.5 seconds quicker, just because I paid for that upgrade and they've just put it straight onto my car. Like it's right. Nuts. Well, exactly. Well, we can do this with buildings, can't we?
No, we can't. I mean, exactly.
But we can in terms of like we should be aiming for that. Like
yes,
this is where we're going.
We need to work together exactly on that. Yeah. And one key element is really getting these interfaces, this sort of communication languages really standardized. Yeah.
And I was going to follow up on that. I see the same thing from the research perspective, like making a change, just taking the example that Rosanna was giving about the Tesla. So the Tesla is one product being developed 1 million times, so they can afford to kind of create and do these updates, whereas the buildings are much more bespoke. So I think the need for ways to represent information in a unified format and in an open format is very important into kind of transferring that idea to buildings. For example, what we're working on Annex 81 is some sort of representation called BRIC, which is an ontology, trying to represent in a uniform way data points so that we can make them discoverable and curable. And this would allow us, using some sort of middleware technology, to approach the data that are being extracted from the building site and then do analytics, do updates in the logic, in the control, and so on and so forth. But I think we're nowhere near that point yet. What I would like to say is that I think that is the vision, and kind of openness, interoperability are the ways that are going to probably get us there. And I think we should be working in that direction, and we should be working in that effort, because I think that could be the gradual step that will get us there. And then kind of showcasing this value and what the value proposition is can help bridge kind of these discrepancies between the different worlds. So we're talking about real estate developers and technologies. And while both of the sides are looking for the better of the built environment, the way of talking and communicating is different, but kind of creating common use case or case studies where we showcase what the outcomes are, I think that can be a very beneficial and positive way of doing this. And one last comment, just to finalize, I think to raise to whatever was discussed before, legacy systems are not going to go away overnight, and we have to acknowledge that. I think we need to kind of think and kind of put in our decision-making process how we interface with that. I don't think IoT is going to replace overnight legacy systems. It's rather that's going to be a gradual evolution, and IoT can complement. So this question about how we complement legacy with modern systems and how we bring all that information so that we can improve decision-making is a quite interesting, both from a research and an application perspective, question.
Yeah, in fact, we want.
Thanks, Dimitrios.
In fact, we want to. Go back to the buildings and to the existing buildings and improve the conditions. I would say that is probably I actually that is unequivocally the biggest market we have right now, especially in this kind of pandemic world. Going back to buildings and then making them more observable and improving them, making them adapt to the new ways of working that we are going to have. In the very, very near future. Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to say, very interested to hear any questions from the audience as well. If this discussion is provoking questions, if you want to ask the audience anything. Before we do that, I want to just move us on to the sort of the ethical implications of some of the things that we've been talking about. So we're talking about Internet of Things, devices all around the built environment, things that we're constantly getting data from us, it's constantly recording it, perhaps sharing that with all sorts of different providers, provokes all sorts of questions, perhaps, doesn't it? I don't know if anyone would like to has thought about that? Who's thinking about that?
Yeah, I
So
mean,
much at the
I can
moment?
maybe start
Francesco,
around
yeah.
that. Yeah, I was making before the point about where the data resides, and you know, the fact that a lot of systems, even cloud and IoT systems, are designed as silos, where data is also owned by the actual company who develops it. And I think this is another aspect that I would like really to change, more in line with what Tim Berners-Lee, for instance, advocates with the Solid project. You know, where data is not something that you know, we give to companies for free almost. Maybe we have in change a little bit of a service. So we do it with the tech companies all the time. But you know, data generated in a building should really be stored in, you know, within the building in a way. You know, what I mean is, if the building has a cloud representation, you know, it still needs to be the kind of the ownership of the people who manage the building, and so this is a big turning point, I think, because it's a moment where the data structures they need to be created in a way so that you know, the physical place where they are is controlled by the end user. So if I do a building for a client, the client as the data is not me keeping those. So I can still architect the way the building you know, produces data, sends data, stores data, but the actual ownership in itself and the access is still you know, stays with the client. The scenario for this is that you know, we are moving towards really a world where all these IoT services they can be almost like utilities, which we can you know, take and switch. And so without having this possibility of you know, ownership of data and connectivity, essentially the problem is that the switching cannot really happen because there is a lock-in into those particular vendor services. And so this is another aspect that I think is quite important to get right. However, the majority of, if not the totality of companies, I think right now, they don't think in the, you know, along the lines of, well, you know, when we create a cloud project, the ownership of the project is in the client. You know, it still, you know, stays within the realm of the service provider or of the manufacturer of those particular devices. So I think we need to change that. That's maybe my little disruption that I would like to, you know, to propose and discuss.
Sure, thanks. Rick, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, I always remember an incident in a previous life where I worked for a service provider. We were responsible for maintaining highways in a particular county in the UK. And our operational team there was trialling a new weed killing chemical from one of its suppliers. And they got given a gun, they got given a vat of this stuff that someone could walk around and spray the weed on. A month afterwards, the vendor came back with a geospatial analysis of where we'd been spraying, because it turned out there was a GPS sensor and a trigger sensor in the kit they provided us. You know, we had not had the sense to explore that aspect of what we were getting into. And that for me is the salutary tale along the lines that Francesco's talking. You know, everything that happens these days has data involved in it, and we need to think about who owns the data, what's the value of the data, what are the ethics around it. I personally think there's a sort of political, social debate to be had there that we're not really having at the moment. You know, go back to 7 tech companies being worth 10% of GDP. A lot of that value has been created by data that's created by transactions that we all participate in. You know, the economic basis for understanding that is just not there in the way that it's there for property or for intellectual property. We have a debate about privacy, which is obviously important, but that's in no way the end of the story. I think organisations like the ODI and the Royal Society have had, you know, quite interesting explorations around things like data trusts and data custodianship and guardianship to enable the sort of thing that I think Francesco is talking about, which is that as individuals or as organizations, we have choices about what we do with data. We need to have a much more sophisticated discussion of that. And I think in sort of technical terms, it then translates into having flexibility in your information architecture about understanding what drivers cause me to place this data in this place today versus how might those drivers change and make me need to think about it being able to move it to a different place tomorrow, and to what extent do I need to prepare for that. I've seen project after project in the past in my IT career where those things weren't thought through, and at some point something changes and an organization gets hit with a massive cost because it has to take a significant change in where it's storing data because a regulation changed or something like that. So yeah, it's of huge importance ethically and commercially.
Now, I'll just add to that as well. Like, we live, and I'm looking at the next generations coming again. How many of them just click accept on Facebook and Instagram, and their data's everywhere, and you start getting adverts about things that you've been talking about recently and all this kind of stuff. There's generations that are coming into the workplace that are used to just accepting anything that's put in front of them, in front of data. That is their life now. So then who takes responsibility to ensure that whatever they're accepting is ethical? And I think that comes down to the businesses themselves, because they're just, it's like robotic, isn't it? You kind of go on, you just accept all cookies because you want to order that thing online, and you just accept this and you just accept that. And before you know it, every part of your life's being tracked, and you probably don't even care, because that's the society that we are growing up in terms of technology. Loads of my friends are like, oh, look, this has just popped up, but oh, okay, that's weird. And then they just continue putting pictures, doing this, doing that, and all of it's going somewhere, and they don't
go
even
into
care
it
where it goes.
is that right? Yeah,
Right. So then who's the responsible person when we're getting this such a disconnect to actually where our data is going? It is just part of everybody's life now, and then like we say, it's organizations to take a much stronger stance, because the behavioral patterns that are coming through and emerging through generations are of this nature, and it's dangerous.
And particularly probably also, you know, there's an interesting angle around how do you design ethically. So like those, you know, the notifications and things, you know, it's much easier to click on the accept button. It's in a massive, big, bold, bright blue box compared to the, oh, look at further options. And so no one can really be bothered sort of to do that. So the way that things are designed as well is
there is guidance on that, because obviously I do marketing stuff like that. You're not allowed to do that.
Is that right?
You've got to give an equal opportunity in terms of choice, so you can't make something stand out more than the other within guidance. But I guess what I'm just getting at is just that when we've got people that are vulnerable coming into our workspaces, who don't fully understand it, who are used to just having their data everywhere, and that's life. Should that be life? Should they be educated more in where their data is going? Should organizations take more responsibility to actually actively educate rather than just hope that they click the accept button? Should there be more of a prominence on actually this is where your data is going, rather than kind of keep quiet and hopefully they accept it? But then also you then look at how do you then do effective marketing and stuff like that, because obviously a lot of this data, and I'm coming from a marketing aspect, so please forgive me, but I'm looking at it from this: how do you effectively reach your consumers and your clients in an effective way unless you're collecting data? So it is that catch-22, isn't it?
It's a bit of an arms race, it would seem, because if one company doesn't do it, another will get some advantage from doing it potentially. So I'm going to ask, given this sort of, we've covered an awful lot of ground, and just got a few minutes left. So if there's any questions, do please ask them. If not, I'm going to go around the houses and just get our panelists to sort of reflect on partly where they see the sort of the market today, but also what is their sort of one wish for the future. What is the one thing that they'd like to see perhaps more of, perhaps thought more of, perhaps one thing that they could change if you had a magic wand that you were able to wave and I could grant you? I can see Rick looking very pensive there, but would you like to comment first, Rick? Do you have a wish for the future that you'd that I could grant you?
Yeah, I mean, why not go for the big picture? So I often think, you know, you get what you ask for. And a lot of times when we talk about places, whether they're buildings or districts or cities, you know, we say we want a great place to live and work. We want a place that's engaging. We want a place that supports healthy, active lifestyles. All too often, though, when we take decisions about what we're going to buy or what we're going to deliver, they're taken financially. And I think it's quite rare that we square that circle, actually. And I think it comes back to decision making. So, you know, oft-quoted idea that, you know, if you reduce energy usage in a building, you can save a certain amount. If you can increase utilization, then you can save 10 times more. If you can increase employee engagement and productivity, you can make 10 times more than that. The latter, however, is much harder to measure and predict and to take decisions based on. I'd like to see us doing it more, however, which I think requires having faith in one's convictions. So that's what I'd like to see. Let's take decisions to do the right thing rather than take decisions based on what's easiest to measure.
Interesting. Thanks, Rick. Rosanna, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think my wish is that obviously we're moving more towards a technology world, and as we've discussed, kind of our offices as necessary as they should be, how will they be used? And you probably realise I've got a big kind of not be in my bonnet, but a big care for the next generations who have only grown up with technology. And my worry is that technology will become all consuming unless we learn how to connect, or we do more human connection. So I suppose my wish is that whilst we're moving towards technology world and it's helping us become more organized and processed and efficient, that we don't lose that element of human connection. We are social creatures, and it's very easy for us to get caught up in our phones and our laptops and actually forget what it feels like to meet someone face to face, and what that does for our own self well-being and things. So my wish is that while we're moving towards this, that we still have a big emphasis on the importance of human connection and kind of, I suppose, our personal well-being.
Yeah, and the role on impact on our mental health and things, and making sure technology is working for us, not perhaps against us, tapping into our addictions and things like that. Thanks, Rosanna. Dimitrios.
Yeah, I would like to follow up on that. I think I also agree that the way technology works or should work should be to serve the users, whoever the users are. So I think we should take a human-centric view. So IoT, digital technologies, all the things that we were talking about, smart buildings, smart energy, smart control, whatever, is there for a purpose, and we should keep that purpose in mind, because it seems to me on some of the discussions that this is lost. It's not technology for the sake of technology. It's not data for the sake of data or AI or all the modern and fancy terms, but really it's using this and equipping our portfolio of solutions so that we can provide value to people. And I think the discussion should always start from the question of value and for whom. And the benefit for digital technologies is that it might be possible, and I would like to see this happening, that we might provide value with costs and somehow lead to, we might provide value without that great costs, and this might lead a step closer to what Rick was talking about, decoupling decision making and value provision. And I think there's an opportunity there.
Great, thanks, Dimitrios. Francesco.
Yeah, my last thought is maybe a bit more selfish about the type of work that I do and so on. I would really like to see data being taken seriously in the way we design buildings, so data and interfaces. So rather than giving, thinking about interfaces to buildings and data as something that results from selecting technology, really thinking the same way we have architects for designing the fabric of the building, and actually having architects for designing as well the user interface to the building, and and how the data is generated, stored, communicated, and with open standards. So I think that only with that approach, I think we can create better experiences in buildings which benefit from technology. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we've covered an awful lot of ground. I just want to thank everyone. Thank everyone for listening, and big thanks to Rick, Rosanna, Dimitrios, and Francesco for your time and for your insights, your expertise, your thoughts, for sharing that over the past hour. And a big thanks again to Arup for sponsoring, and a big shout out to everyone, because we have another the next in this series looking at automation and IoT and technology in the built environment next week, which will be at the same time, same place. So do check out those. There's a whole series of events up on the Elemental website and on Eventbrite, where you can purchase tickets to watch these for free, and of course to listen back. And if you have any other questions that perhaps we didn't get to or we didn't cover in the meantime, do send them in to us at Elemental, and we'll do our best to direct them on to some of our experts and our speakers here out in the field, and get answers back to you in the relevant way. So thanks very much, everyone. Stay safe out there at the moment, and hopefully see you at the same time again next week. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.